Hello, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for clicking on this video and watching. Just a quick little note that if you like true crime or commentary content, I post almost every week, so please subscribe, like, and comment if you feel so inclined. So anyways, a little preface. I usually try to cover cases about like BIPOC individuals who are victimized or murdered because historically their cases don't receive a lot of media attention, so that's really why I created my YouTube channel. But I'm going to sidestep that today and tell like a Christmas true crime story because it is the holiday season, so I guess it's fitting. This case occurred almost 91 years ago, so I feel like it makes it a little easier for me to research. A lot of the cases I do research are really heavy and hard for me to like deal with sometimes, because when you're researching hours and hours about an awful tragedy that happened to a person, it's really awful, especially BIPOC individuals who you often in these cases see them be failed by so many people. So this is sort of a little break for me, which is weird because it's an entire family getting murdered. But anyways, it's so long ago that it's like it's almost mystified. Like the town where it happened in is sort of like super not enchanted, that's the wrong word, but like it's like a folklore almost for them, this case. Anyways, so that's my little preface. So let's get into the case about how Charles Lawson murdered his entire family on Christmas Day in 1929. Charles Davis Lawson was born on May 10th, 1886 to parents Augustus and Nancy Lawson in Stokes County, North Carolina. There are various reports on how many siblings he had. It seems unclear. It was so long ago that like the family trees and stuff like that are a little convoluted going back, but there are some reports that say he had 6 siblings, and then there's some reports that say he had 2, but I do know for sure that he had at least 2 brothers named Marion and Elijah Lawson. Because it's so long ago, little is known publicly about Charles' early life and his parents, like how they raised him, but he seemed to be of lower/working class growing up. In 1911, Charles ended up marrying a woman, I think she lived in the town, named Fanny Manring. Over the next almost 2 decades, the couple went on to have 8 children together, 4 daughters and 4 sons, and their 8 children, oldest to youngest, were Marie, Arthur, William, Carrie, Mabel, James, Raymond, and Mary Lou. Charles and Fanny's 3rd child was a son named William, and he was born in 1914, and unfortunately he died from an unspecified illness when he was around 6 years old in 1920. In 1918, Charles and Fanny moved with their few young children to a different location in Stokes County, because Charles's 2 brothers, Elijah and Marion, had moved there, so they moved to follow them. After moving, Charles started to work as a tobacco tenant farmer to support his growing family. Essentially, tenant farming is similar to sharecropping, and it's when a farmer or someone who wants to farm or grow crops doesn't have enough money to purchase their own land to plant crops, so they rent a piece of land from a landowner and then they pay them like a monthly or yearly rent. Charles and Fanny finally saved up enough money from Charles's tenant tobacco farming to buy their own farm in 1927, and the farm was located on Brook Cove Road, and I think it was beside his brother's farm. It was a pretty small and run down sort of farm. I'll put pictures up of what the farm looked like at the time, but it sort of got the job done, and since they were like working class, this was what they could afford, and Charles continued to work as a tobacco farmer. So since the Lawson family was working class, they didn't really have enough money to buy anything other than necessities, so they never splurged on things or bought things in excess because they just didn't have the means for it. So that's why Charles's behavior the month before the murders was so strange and unusual. So leading up to that fateful Christmas in 1929, Charles started acting weirdly. In fact, a few months prior to the massacre, he actually visited, I think, his family doctor and complained to his doctor about having extreme headaches and really struggling with insomnia and not being able to sleep properly. I don't know what came from this doctor's visit or if there was a diagnosis, but none is specified. Later, after the massacre, family and friends would come forward and state that Charles had actually suffered a head injury a few months prior, so I guess around the time these symptoms of insomnia and massive migraines started happening. I think he was just working on the farm and hit himself in the head, and so that happened. So it's said that shortly after sustaining this head injury, Charles began acting really erratically and strange. He seemed to be, prior to this, pretty well liked in his community and a good father to his children by all reports. We'll see. We'll find out. But people that knew him started saying the months leading up to December 1929, he started acting erratically and he was angered a lot more easily. And sometimes when he was angered during this time period, he would become violent, which he wasn't previously. So then we fast forward to around 2 weeks before Christmas Day in 1929. So it's early December, and Charles announces to his family that he wants to take them into town and buy them all new outfits and toys and have a family portrait taken. So as I said before, the Lawson family was working class, so they didn't really have the means for this sort of stuff, and Charles had never proposed this sort of thing before. He had never bought his whole family just new clothes and toys and portraits in such a short period of time. But anyways, so 2 weeks before Christmas, the Lawson family, the parents and their 7 children, traveled to town. Charles buys them all new clothing. They put on their new clothing and get a family portrait taken. And family portraits were more for middle to upper class sort of families. It was unusual for a working family or working class family to purchase a family portrait just because it's living above their means sort of thing. So I don't know if they had a portrait ever done before this, but I don't think so. So in retrospect, I'll put the portrait up on the screen, but a lot of people state that they all look pretty miserable in the photograph, especially Fanny, the mother, who is holding baby Mary Lou and looking off screen in the portrait, and Marie, the eldest daughter, looks pretty miserable as well. She's sort of staring stonily at the camera with a noticeable frown on her face. But when I'm looking at the photograph, it just looks like an old photo to me. I don't remember studio portraits done 100 years ago where families were smiling. So for me, I'm a little more skeptical of that. So then after the studio portrait is done and completed, they all go back. They live their normal lives for 2 weeks. Nothing notable seems to happen until the Christmas Day massacre. On December 25th, 1929, the eldest daughter, Marie, who is 17 years old at the time, wakes up early, I think before anyone else in the house, to start baking the family a Christmas cake. So then sometime after Marie starts baking the Christmas cake, their eldest son in the family, Arthur, who I believe is 16 at the time, was sent either by himself, or he wanted to go, or by his father Charles to go into town and buy shotgun shells. Arthur was doing this because he was under the impression that him and his father Charles were going to go later that afternoon to go rabbit hunting. It was a sort of town tradition for the men to go, or the older men in the families to go rabbit hunting on Christmas Day. It's sort of interesting for me to note this because Charles used the gun in the massacre, so it's obvious that he did have shotgun shells, but he still sent, or Arthur still went to go to buy more, so maybe he didn't know, or his father lied to him about having shotgun shells. Anyways, so Arthur is gone for a few hours on his errand. It is now theorized that Charles was the one that actually sent Arthur into town to get shotgun shells because he knew that Arthur was physically bigger than him, so he was capable of overpowering his dad, Charles, when Charles was killing the family. Or it could be possible that Arthur was Charles' favorite child and he wanted him to be spared, or maybe he was his least favorite child and he wanted him to live with the sorrow of not having his family around. It's not known. So after Arthur leaves to go into town, Charles goes out to the tobacco barn to sit and wait to ambush the first two children that he kills. So Carrie, who was 12 at the time, and Mabel, who was 7, they were the middle two daughters. They were leaving the house to go to visit their aunt and uncle, who I guess lived nearby their own farm. So as they leave the house, they walk by the tobacco barn and Charles comes out and shoots them both. To ensure that they were dead after shooting them, he bludgeons them and beats them and then puts their bodies in the barn. It's said that the family wasn't initially alarmed by the gunshots when Charles was murdering Mabel and Carrie because of the rabbit hunting tradition. It was pretty commonplace for people to hear gunshots on Christmas Day, so it wasn't really notable to them. Once he stores the bodies in the barn, he then walks towards the house. Fanny, his wife, is sitting on the porch of the house and sees him coming at her with the shotgun, and then he shoots her and bludgeons her to death before entering the house. So it is believed that Maria was still in the kitchen baking and finishing icing the Christmas cake when she heard the gunshots. With her inside the house were the 3 youngest siblings, so her brother James, who was 4 at the time, her brother Raymond, who was 2, and Mary Lou, who was only 4 months old at the time. After hearing the gunshots from directly outside of their house, they became alarmed and tried to run and hide from their father, who then entered the house. When he enters the house, it's sort of unclear, and different accounts say different things as to whether he killed Mary Lou before or after he killed the other 3 children, but either way, sadly, he killed baby Mary Lou by bludgeoning her to death. Her cause of death was a fractured skull. After or before killing Mary Lou, he finds Marie, who he shoots and then bludgeons to death, and then he finds the 2 youngest sons, James and Raymond, who were hiding from him in the house, and he bludgeons both of them to death. So it's sort of interesting to note that he did not shoot the youngest 3 when killing them. He just, beat them to death, sadly. So Mary Lou, James, and Raymond, who were all 4 and under, he didn't shoot. So I don't know if this was because he was growing in his rage or he ran out of shotgun shells. It's unknown, but just interesting to note. So once he's done the massacre, he brings all the bodies into the house, including his 2 daughters, which he stored in the tobacco barn. And so he puts Mary Lou in her crib and just lays her down, and then for the rest of the 6 bodies, he lays them down on the floor side by side. He crosses their arms over their chest and puts rocks under their head to act as pillows. This is what you do when it's like the position someone is in when they are buried for their funeral or open casket. You're kind of laid like that, so people thought it was like an act of remorse that he was prepping the body or staging them like this. So after positioning the bodies, Charles heads out to the woods with his shotgun. So in the actual aftermath of the family massacre, it's unclear who discovered the bodies, as there are several different accounts of this. There are some that say Arthur, once he returned his errand in town, he was the one that discovered all 7 of the bodies. There are others who say it was actually his brother and his brother's wife who were coming over to just celebrate the holidays or say Merry Christmas to the family who discovered the bodies. And then there are others still who say that the neighbors started hearing all the gunshots, so a bunch of people came out to collect outside of the Lawson family home, and then Arthur and police were notified and they discovered the bodies. Either way, the bodies were found that same day, and Charles was nowhere to be found for hours after the massacre. Then, while many were gathered outside of the Lawson family house, just like astonished by what had happened, including police and Arthur, they heard a single gunshot from the woods. So a police officer ran towards the noise of the gunshot and discovered Charles's deceased body. It appeared that he had shot himself with the shotgun. So I guess that means that he didn't run out of, shotgun shells when murdering the family. Anyways, the officer noted that there were a lot of footprints encircling a nearby tree, so it is believed that Charles was pacing around this tree for hours after what he had done before he took his own life. Then they found letters either on or beside Charles's body. Amongst the letters were 2 incomplete notes that read, or one read, "Nobody to blame but," and the other read, "Troubles can cause." It is believed that the "nobody to blame but" was sort of Charles admitting that he was the only one that was guilty in this instance of the massacre. In the days following the massacre, autopsies were done on all 8 bodies, and the coroner who did the autopsy on Charles's body noted that Charles's brain was small and appeared to be underdeveloped in certain areas, like towards the middle of the brain. After the massacre, Charles's brain, I don't know if it was a few years after and it was preserved or immediately after, but either way, his brain was flown out to Johns Hopkins where it was studied, and the doctors and scientists or whoever did study the brain there found that Charles's brain was actually normal and there was no noticeable brain injury or, underdevelopment. Relatives of the Lawson family, I believe it was Charles's younger brother Marion, actually decided to make money off of the family tragedy, which, if you know a lot about old true crime cases, this is often done where these sort of murders are really scandalous and everyone wants to see it, so they break into the crime scene, or people pay for admission to go in the crime scene. This is more of a common practice 100 years ago, so it's not that crazy. Anyways, Marion decided to make people pay 25 cents to get admission into the house, the Lawson family house. They even put Marie's Christmas cake that she had baked on that day on display for visitors to ogle at. But then a lot of visitors started picking off raisins from the cake to keep as a souvenir, so they had to put it behind glass, and it is said that the cake was kept there for years on display. The crime scene wasn't even really cleaned before people were allowed in to tour the house, so there was still blood and stuff all along the walls, rooms, and furniture while people were walking through. In Marion's defense, it was stated that he decided, or he was prompted to force people to pay for admission because a lot of people in the town were actually breaking into the house and looting the house for like trophies they could keep of the murder. So that's why he blocked it off and forced people to pay for entry. The motive behind the Lawson family massacre sort of eluded Stokes County for decades to come. No one could figure out why Charles did this to his family on Christmas Day until a book called White Christmas, Bloody Christmas was published in 1990, written by Trudy Smith. The book details Trudy and her father's sort of journey. Her father's name is Bruce Jones. Their journey to discover what happened to the Lawson family. Trudy's father was 8 years old at the time of the murders, and he did sort of have connections to the family and know about them. So the book uncovered that Charles Lawson had allegedly murdered his entire family to cover up an incestuous affair he was having with his eldest daughter, Marie. I want to note that the affair was most likely unconsensual, and it was Charles sexually abusing Marie. So a lot of the book is just accounts from people that knew the family, sort of confirming this narrative. So Hill Hampton, who was a close friend of Charles, and he was actually a neighbor to the Lawson family, said that the Lawson family did indeed have an awful secret, but he always refused to actually explain what the awful secret was. Then Marion Lawson, who is Charles' younger brother, his daughter Stella Lawson Bowles came forward and told Trudy that indeed Marie and Charles were having an incestuous affair at the time of the family massacre. Stella said that when she was at the Lawson family murders, or their funeral, she wasn't at the murders, when she was at their funeral, she overheard her own mother and a few other Lawson family women talking about the affair. They were talking about how Fanny, Charles' wife, had actually come forward to them to confide in them about the affair that her husband was having with Marie, and she was sort of agonized and completely destroyed and didn't know how to proceed. Then one of Marie Lawson's closest friends, Ella Mae Johnson, came forward and sort of confirmed the incestuous allegations. She said that she actually had a sleepover with Marie a few weeks before the family massacre, and at the sleepover, Marie had confided in Ella that she was indeed having an affair with her father and that she was actually pregnant with her father's child. She told Ella that both her mother and her father were aware of the pregnancy. The last account backing up the incest theory was proposed from another neighbor of the Lawson family, Sam Hill. Sam stated that he had heard, I guess through the grapevine, that Charles had sexually assaulted Marie, his eldest daughter, and she had fallen pregnant. Sam says that Charles actually threatened Marie that if Marie told her mother or anyone else that he would have to kill them. So that's basically it for the Christmas Day massacre of the Lawson family. There were other theories proposed as to the motive, but they have a lot less substantial evidence. There were some theories that it wasn't Charles who massacred the family, it was actually someone else who robbed the house and killed the entire family, but this is unsubstantiated and doesn't really make sense with the evidence that was found at the crime scene. There was another theory that Charles murdered his family because of the Great Depression that was happening in the late 1920s, where everyone was financially bankrupt, so he was struggling and decided decided to murder his whole family. There was another theory that the head injury that he had sustained a few months before the family massacre actually caused his violent behavior. He sort of went crazy. But again, this is unsubstantiated because scientists or whoever have studied the brain and noticed no substantial brain damage. Either way, that is the story of the Lawson family massacre. I hope you enjoyed it as much as you can enjoy a story about a whole entire family being murdered. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and happy holidays.